Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. I never imagined I'd find myself in such a situation at 62. Life, after all, was supposed to be predictable by now, mornings spent tending to my garden, afternoons filled with quiet reading, and evenings beside my husband Mark as we reminisced about the years behind us. But one evening, a private conversation changed everything, leaving me questioning what I thought I knew. It all started with a corporate gala hosted by Mark's company. He had worked there for over 3 decades, rising through the ranks with unwavering dedication. His boss, Richard Caldwell, was a man of quiet authority, someone I had only exchanged polite pleasantries with at previous events. He was in his mid-60s, tall and distinguished, with an air of quiet confidence that seemed effortless. The gala was held at an upscale hotel in downtown Chicago, its grand chandeliers casting a warm glow over the elegantly dressed attendees. The room hummed with conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the soft melody of a live jazz band in the corner. I wasn't particularly fond of these events, I preferred the comfort of home. But Mark had insisted, so I had slipped into a modest navy blue dress and agreed to accompany him. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary at first. Mark was caught up in discussions with his colleagues, and I occupied myself by chatting with the other spouses. That was until Richard approached me. "Evelyn, may I have a moment?" he asked, his deep voice carrying over the din of the room. I hesitated a moment. What could Mark's boss possibly want with me? But I smiled lightly and nodded, following him as he led me through a side corridor away from the main ballroom. The air was quieter here, the sounds of the gala fading behind us. He guided me to a private lounge, a cozy room with dim lighting, a fireplace, and leather armchairs. The tension in the air was subtle but undeniable. I could feel my heart beating just a little faster as I took a seat across from him. "I hope I'm not pulling you away from anything important," he said, offering a small, almost nervous smile. "Not at all," I assured him, though I couldn't shake the curiosity bubbling inside me. "What's on your mind?" He sighed, rubbing his hands together as if searching for the right words. Then finally, he spoke. "It's about Mark." At that, I straightened in my chair, my stomach tightening. "Is something wrong?" He hesitated. "Not exactly, but there's something I think you should know." I could feel the weight of his words before he even said them. There was a seriousness in his expression that unsettled me, a quiet intensity that made my pulse quicken. "Evelyn," he continued, his voice gentle but firm, "I've known Mark for a long time. I've watched him build his career, support his colleagues, and take care of his family. And through it all, I've noticed something." I swallowed hard. "What is it?" He leaned forward. Forward slightly, his gaze locked onto mine. "He doesn't appreciate you the way he should." The words landed like a heavy stone in my chest. My breath caught, and I felt an immediate wave of defensiveness rise within me. "I don't understand," I stammered. "Mark is a good husband. He's always been." Richard nodded. "I know he is, but tell me, Evelyn, when was the last time he truly saw you? Not just as his wife, but as the remarkable woman you are." I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. He continued, his voice softer now. "I've seen the way you look at him when he's too busy to notice. I watch you stand in the background at events like these while he loses himself in work. You give so much, but does he give back?" A lump formed in my throat. I wanted to protest, to tell him he was wrong, but something deep inside me wavered. "I don't mean to overstep," Richard said, leaning back slightly, "but sometimes an outsider sees what those inside cannot." I exhaled slowly, my mind racing. Richard studied my face, then offered a small, knowing smile. "Evelyn, you deserve to be seen." The words struck a chord I hadn't realized existed within me, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't sure what to feel. I sat there frozen. Richard's words echoed in my mind, stirring something I wasn't ready to confront. "You deserve to be seen." Had I really gone unnoticed for so long? I wanted to brush off his words as mere observation, a well-intended but misguided attempt at kindness, but deep down, something in me knew he was right. Mark was a good man, a hard-working provider. He had always been steady, reliable. But in the quiet moments, the ones that mattered, when had he last truly looked at me? When had he last noticed the small ways I tried to keep our life warm and full? The way I folded his shirts just the way he liked, the way I kept our home filled with his favorite things, the way I had stood by his side through every career triumph. I cleared my throat, pushing down the lump that had settled there. Richard, He held up a hand, stopping me. I don't mean to make you uncomfortable, but I couldn't stand by and say nothing. I let out a slow breath. I appreciate your honesty, I said finally, though my voice was softer than I intended. But Mark and I have been together for decades. Marriage is about more than just being seen, it's about commitment, stability. Richard nodded. I know, and I respect that. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. But have you ever asked yourself what you truly want? The question lingered in the space between us. What I wanted. I had spent so many years focused on what Mark needed, what our marriage required, what was expected of me. I had never truly stopped to think about what I wanted. I let out a small, nervous laugh. Richard, this is quite the conversation to be having at a corporate gallery. That made him smile. I suppose it is, but something told me I needed to say it. A moment of silence stretched between us, filled only by the soft crackling of the fireplace, then he sighed, standing up. I should let you get back. I stood too, smoothing my dress with slightly trembling hands. Yes, Mark will wonder where I am. Richard nodded, but there was something unreadable in his expression. Evelyn, just promise me one thing. I tilted my head. What's that? Don't dismiss what I said, think about it. I hesitated, then nodded slowly. All right. He gave me a small smile before stepping aside, gesturing toward the door. As I walked past him, I felt the warmth of his presence beside me, the weight of the conversation still pressing on my chest. The gala was still in full swing when I returned. Mark was exactly where I had left him, deep in conversation with his colleagues. He didn't notice me at first. I stood at a distance for a moment, watching him. His face was animated, his hands moving as he spoke. It was a side of him I had always loved, his passion, his drive. But then I thought about what Richard had said. Had Mark ever looked at me that way? When he finally glanced over and saw me standing there, he gave me a small nod before turning back to his conversation. Something inside me shifted. Richard had planted a seed, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I knew it was already beginning to grow. The drive home was quiet. Mark sat beside me, his hands firmly gripping the wheel, his gaze focused on the dark road ahead. The city lights flickered past in a blur, but my mind was elsewhere. Richard's words still echoed in my head, his voice lingering in a way I couldn't shake. You deserve to be seen. I stole a glance at Mark. He looked tired, the faintest crease of stress between his brows. We had been married for nearly 40 years, and in that time, I had memorized every detail of his face, the sharp lines of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the way his lips pressed together in concentration. But when was the last time he had really looked at me? He cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Did you have a good time tonight? The question caught me off guard. It was something he asked after every event, every gathering, every dinner party, almost as if out of obligation rather than genuine curiosity. I hesitated before answering. It was interesting. He nodded absently. Good, good. And just like that, the conversation ended. I turned my gaze back toward the window, watching the city slip away as we moved toward the quiet suburbs. When we got home, Mark did what he always did, took off his jacket, set his keys on the counter, and retreated to his office for one last check of his emails. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at the empty space where he had just been. I wasn't angry at him, not exactly. Mark had always been this way, dedicated to his work, steady in his routines. He had given me a good life, a secure life. But Richard's words had unearthed something in me, something I couldn't push back down. I walked to the bedroom and caught. I saw my reflection in the mirror. 62 years old, my once auburn hair now carried streaks of silver. Faint lines traced my face, reminders of the years I had lived. But my eyes, they were still the same, and in them, I saw something I hadn't noticed in a long time: loneliness. I had always assumed this was just part of aging, this quiet fading into the background, this gradual slipping into routine. But now, for the first time, I wondered. The next morning, as Mark left for work, he kissed me on the cheek and said, "I'll be home late, there's a big client meeting." I nodded, offering a small smile. "All right, be safe," and then he was gone. I stood in the doorway for a long moment before stepping back inside. Normally, I would fill my day with errands, housework, or gardening, but today I felt restless. Before I could talk myself out of it, I reached for my phone and dialed a number I never thought I would. Richard answered on the second ring. "Evelyn." His voice carried the faintest note of surprise. I took a slow breath. "Do you have time for a cup of coffee?" There was a pause, and then softly, "Of course." An hour later, I found myself sitting across from him at a quiet cafe near the lake. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans and fresh pastries, and outside, the autumn leaves danced in the breeze. Richard looked at me with quiet curiosity. "I wasn't sure if I'd hear from you." I stirred my coffee, watching the swirls of cream blend into the dark liquid. "I wasn't sure if I'd call." He nodded, waiting. I exhaled slowly. "I've been thinking about what you said." His expression remained unreadable, and I hesitated, then met his gaze. "You were..." Something flickered in his eyes, something I couldn't quite name. "Evelyn, I'm not saying I regret my life," I interrupted gently. "Mark and I have built something strong, something real. But somewhere along the way, I think I forgot how to want something for myself." Richard leaned forward slightly. "And now?" I swallowed hard. "Now I don't know." A silence settled between us, filled only by the distant hum of conversation around us. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice quiet. "I just want you to be happy." I looked at him, really looked at him. Here was a man who had no reason to interfere in my life, no reason to say the things he had, except that he had seen something in me that even I hadn't. And suddenly, I realized I had a choice to make. I sat there, staring at Richard across the small cafe table, my hands wrapped around the warm ceramic of my coffee cup. "I just want you to be happy." His words hung in the air, heavy yet gentle, like a truth I had been avoiding for far too long. For years, I had told myself that contentment was enough, that security, stability, and loyalty were the pillars of a good life. And they were. But Richard had uncovered something else in me, something I hadn't even known was missing: a need to feel. I took a slow breath, the weight of my thoughts pressing down on me. "Richard, I don't know what to do." With all of this, his eyes softened. "You don't have to do anything, Evelyn. Just think about what makes you happy. When was the last time you did something just for yourself?" I opened my mouth to respond but stopped. When was the last time? I had spent decades ensuring Mark was supported, that his career, his goals, his world remained intact. I had created a life of order, of routine, but what about me? I took a sip of my coffee, the rich, bitter warmth grounding me for a moment. "I don't know who I am outside of my marriage," I admitted, the words surprising even myself. Richard gave me a small, knowing smile. "Then maybe it's time to find out." I let out a breathy, nervous laugh. "That sounds terrifying." "Maybe, but also exciting, don't you think?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because deep down I knew he was right. We sat in silence for a while, the world outside moving as it always did, cars passing, people laughing, the wind rustling the golden autumn leaves. Life didn't pause for reflection, but maybe for the first time I needed to. Finally, I set my cup down and met his gaze. I don't know what the future holds, Richard, but I do know that I need to start living again. A smile tugged at the corner of his lips. That's all I wanted you to realize. That night when Mark came home, I was already sitting at the kitchen table waiting. He barely looked at me as he set his briefcase down and loosened his tie. Long day, he muttered. I am exhausted. I watched him for a moment, this man I had built a life with, this man I had loved for decades, and yet as he moved around the house, there was a distance between us, a chasm I hadn't noticed growing over the years. I took a deep breath. Mark, can we talk? He paused, finally glancing at me. About what? I swallowed. About us. His brows furrowed slightly. What about us? I hesitated, then said the words that had been building inside me since last night. I feel invisible, Mark. He blinked. What? I feel like I've spent years being the wife who supports you, who keeps things running, who makes sure everything in our life stays steady. And I do love you, but somewhere along the way I stopped being seen. He frowned, clearly caught off guard. Evelyn, where is this coming from? I shook my head. It's been there for a long time. I just never let myself say it out loud. He sat down across from me, rubbing a hand over his face. I didn't know you felt this way. I studied him carefully. Did you ever wonder? He was silent, and in that moment I realized something painful. Mark wasn't a bad husband, he wasn't cruel or neglectful on purpose. He had simply assumed, as I had, that marriage meant routine, that comfort was enough, that we didn't need to check in on each other the way we once did. But that wasn't living, that wasn't love, not anymore. What are you saying? He finally asked, his voice cautious. I inhaled deeply. I need to start living for me again. His face paled slightly. Are you leaving me? I hesitated, then shook my head. I don't know what the future holds. But I do know that I can't keep looking like this, and if we want this marriage to survive, something has to change. He looked at me for a long time, and for the first time in years, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Realization. Maybe we had a chance to fix this, maybe we didn't. But for the first time in decades, I was ready to find out.